Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Platinum major Implats has reached an agreement in principle with the government of Zimbabwe to give over control of its Zimplats mine. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin. Now, can you tell us the story so far between Implats and Zimplats and what has been agreed between the government and the miner?
Yeah, it's been a long, drawn-out battle, and it's the in-principle agreement that you have to look at. It's very much in principle. You know, the details have still got to be worked out, and I think there's still a lot of water to flow under the bridge in this transaction. And I think that the indigenization minister, Xavier Kasukuwira, he will realize that he has to get up very early in the morning to catch up with David Brown. I think he's been outsmarted here quite considerably, but he'll only realize that afterwards, because this deal is in three parts, and the 51% control is made up of three separate deals. The first is with the community, where the community will be given a loan to buy 10% of the shares. That loan will be given to the community by Implats itself, and the community will then pay that back when they receive dividends. And once they've paid it back, of course, those shares will belong to them and the dividends will eventually flow to them. The second one is with the workers. It's a 10% deal. It's the same sort of principle that Implats provides the loans to the workers. The workers then buy the shares with those loans and they pay the loan off through dividend flow. So it's things that we do every day in South Africa, and those deals are likely to go through. But the 31% to the indigenization board, the state-controlled indigenization board, is a totally different deal. There's no what we call vendor finance. You know, you don't have a situation of the company saying, we will fund that. You know, we will give you the money to buy. They're not going to give any money to the government to buy that 31%. So the government, which is in a parlous financial state, you know, is going to have to find itself, you know, $500 million to $1 billion to start thinking of getting that 31%. And before they even say this 31% is available to you, the offer that was previously made by Implats to the Zimbabwe government, they said, you know, we want to earn empowerment credits because we've got a lot of property here, platinum-bearing property, that we won't be mining for a long time. So on a sort of use it or lose it principle, they said, okay, we will give that back to you, but then you must give us empowerment credits. Those empowerment credits haven't been finalized, so they're saying, okay, if you're not going to give us the empowerment credits for that, then give us the cash. You know, that cash is $153 million US on its own. You know, they're going to struggle to do that part of the deal. Until they do that, until that $153 million cash comes into the Implats bank account, they won't even talk about that 31% again. That is your opening chip. You've got to put $153 million into the Implats bank account. Then they will say, okay, this 31% is available to you, but it's available to you at fair value, fair compensation, and the fair compensation must be worked out by independent professionals. And once they've worked it out, you can pay cash. You have to pay cash on a contributory basis, which means that if they then decide that you've now got, say, the 31% is through, and between the state and the employers and the community, they've now got 51% control. Implats is already champing at the bit to spend another $1 billion on an expansion there. They're even talking of building a refinery there. So if the government wants to keep that 51%, or if the board wants to keep its 31% and the employers keep the 10% and the community keeps the 10%, they'll have to be throwing more money into this, particularly the government. Where are they going to get it from? So it means that if they can't contribute, because this is cash contribution they've got to make, like every other equity capital provider, every other shareholder, they follow their rights. If they don't follow their rights, that 51% theoretically could become less than 51%, or on the part of the government board, that 31% could go to 21%. So they wouldn't have control anymore. So, you know, it is a very tenuous deal, this. I think that, you know, the indigenization minister, Xavier Kasukuwera, he has been engaging in a lot of rhetoric, pre-election rhetoric, beating a drum to draw a lot of attention to himself, to give the impression that he's a strong man and that he can force them to hand over value. But when, push comes to shove, probably the election will have already taken place and this deal will still not be through. He might say then, okay, you got it for the workers and the community, but that, most companies these days, South African companies, they do that as a matter of course. And so in Zimbabwe, they'll do it as a matter of course. But the state wouldn't have got its 30%, or it would possibly have got a portion of that 31, but still not the full one. So it's going to be a long time before this deal is settled. I hate to say, there might even be a change of government by the time this deal is settled. And we saw the attitude of the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, because we have a government of national unity there. We saw the attitude of Morgan Tsvangirai. We got that piece on video, and he was saying, look, we in this government of national unity, but we don't see eye to eye. We don't have common values. We don't like what they're doing to Implats. Now, what I also get confirmed from Implats is that the South African government is standing foursquare behind Implats, and they will not tolerate unfair value being given in this indigenization process. Why David Brown went to the table on deadline, and he was set that 14-day deadline because he was resisting all of this, but then they set the 14-day deadline, and he wanted to be seen to be complying with the law, because nobody wants to break the law of a land. So because that was the law, that is why he arrived there and reached that in-principle decision. And he was getting a wink and a nod to do that from the South African government and from, I'm sure, the opposition MDC, Movement for Democratic Change. Obviously, that is not said in public, but I get the distinct impression that definitely the South African government, but also elements within the party, even perhaps the Department of Mining there, the mining minister, is also not happy with the bullying that Implats has been having to take on the chin. But in going into the deal and forcing an in-principle decision from the indigenization minister, he's actually totally outsmarted that minister.
Now, the treaty protection under the South Africa-Zimbabwe bilateral agreement commits the Zimbabwe government to pay fair compensation for the Zimplats shares. Do you think this is likely to be upheld, and what constitutes fair compensation?
Well, every South African should see that it's upheld. I mean, there's no good doing these bilateral agreements. And I get the impression, the distinct impression from the government, they will stand foursquare behind this. Because it's not only Implats that's a South African company in Zimbabwe. There are a lot of South African companies in Zimbabwe, and they are looking with a very keen eye to see that the indigenization process is done fairly. Because you also must be vigilant to ensure that, some of the ZANU PF party guys don't run off with the spoils here. Is it genuinely going to genuine people and the right thing being done, or people within party power trying to grab control? So I can see the tension developing between South African government and the Zimbabwe government of national unity, but only elements within that government, not the total government. And I will bet my bottom dollar that the South Africans will not tolerate unfairness. They will see that that particular bilateral agreement is upheld to the letter.
Now, CEO David Brown says the agreement in principle won't negatively impact any future expansion opportunities. Can you elaborate on that? And
that's where he's been so clever. He's got them to agree to a contributory cash payment that allows for dilution. Now, that means that if he wants to expand, and he's already been talking about a phase 3 expansion of Zimplats for many months, and he wants to go ahead with it now in 2013, just the phase 3 will take another $1 billion. And before this particular indigenization board, I think, has even crossed the first hurdle, they will already be wanting to go ahead with phase 3 of the Zimplats platinum mine. And on top of that, they are offering to build a refinery that all platinum companies can use within the year. Now, this is a mouth-watering carrot that is dangling before the people of Zimbabwe. And let's face it, you know, when we look at the way we do business in South Africa, I think we have really worked out our mining model better than most, although some people are calling for nationalisation. I mean, if you examine it, you know, the government is already getting 50% profit out of these mines. That's a great position to be in. They only benefit from the upside. They never have to put their hand in the pocket when there's a downside. Now, we see what's happened to Botswana with diamonds. When diamonds are no longer the world's best friend, you know, and people aren't buying them, it's a huge strain on the Botswana government. They have to put their hand in the pocket and pull out billions of pula because they are a 50-50 partner. And if they keep that 50%, they've got to put in pula for pula what De Beers puts in. Government shouldn't be doing this, although, you know, with apologies to Julius Malema and co. Government should be looking to, you know, servicing the people, not having to put money into risk businesses. And so I think, you know, the South Africans have got the great formula, and perhaps people will realise that, hopefully, before any changes are made, and other countries also realise that, because even with this board now becoming a shareholder, say the indigenisation board becomes a shareholder, it will not want the government to charge more tax, because it's going to lose out on its shares. So it's going to be a few people benefiting again, instead of taxes being paid in general and flowing through to everybody. That's the fair way to do it. And I hope people will get through to that realisation. But yes, he says, I can expand because you have agreed to an in-principle decision that if we need to expand, you have got to put cash in. And if you don't, your shareholding diminishes. And you've agreed to that. So,
and the media has seen it.
And it's all been blasted around the world for everybody to hear.
Now, finally, can you tell us about the payment decisions for the shares?
Well, you know, I think that the two initial hurdles, the community deal and the worker deal, that is standard practice in South Africa. That will go through.
And it's a beneficial.
It'll be great. You know, they will have, I think there are going to be a number of chiefs on the board of the community trust and also independent professionals. And then they will vote that 10%. So they will have will be a normal, good shareholding. The workers will have the same thing. There will be worker representatives on that board, possibly government representatives on that board, but also independent professionals on that board. And the trust for the worker trust. And they will vote another 10% share. So the voting of 20% of the shareholding will happen, I think, even if there's another government in place. You know, this will come through because South Africans are used to doing this. They do it every day, and it's good for the business. But, you know, getting the money around for the other 31%, despite the rhetoric, you know, of Saviour Kusukukuwera, you know, he talks and he beats the drum. Show me the money, Saviour. Let's see where you're going to get it from. Because this is a lot of money we're talking about, particularly if they keep expanding. And what he's going to do, he's going to put a rope around the neck of his government, because you know, they're going to not be able to keep up these payments. And if they do, they're going to be neglecting hospitals, they're going to be neglecting schools, they're going to be neglecting roads and all the things governments are there to do. They mustn't confuse what they're supposed to do. Leave business to do it and get that revenue stream. And if you structure it well, you know, you can become a 50% partner without any of the downside. But they're going about it the wrong way. They're bullying, they're frightening off investment. They are damaging the future of their country. They are damaging good South African business. And hopefully, you know, this will be a long drawn out thing and never happen. But in the meantime, the South Africans can't be accused of not obeying the law. But once they go into the detail, I think the funds will be the sticking point. How they get that money will be the problem. Their finances are in bad shape, and they shouldn't be using finance in this way.
And especially considering the finance minister has already said the government they can just afford to pay salaries, and then because of diamonds haven't come through, the whole country will collapse.
Exactly.
So
So look, they're not cash flush.
Yeah.
So you don't play around with these sort of investments.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. We'll definitely keep an eye on that one.
Great pleasure, Shannon.
That's the show for today. Join us again next time for more news and insight into what's happening in the mining world.